Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to episode 301 of the FMCG Guys. Daniel here. Hard to believe it's episode 301, isn't it? Wanted to let you know before we start the podcast that shortly after recording it remotely, we actually had the pleasure to visit the small beer brewery in South Bermondsey in London, where Felix and James hosted us and showed us around. And we actually recorded some content there, I don't know if to call it behind the scenes because it wasn't really where we recorded the podcast, but some extra content where we learned how they brew the beer, we tasted the beer. So it's a fun few minutes. We will be posting that on Instagram in the coming days. So I'm leaving our Instagram link in the show notes in case you're not following us yet. You can follow us there. You'll see the video coming up in a few days, and you also see other content that we post around our guests and our social activations that we're doing every time more oftenly within the consumer goods and retail world. So look forward to seeing you there as well. Enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. This is Daniel Torres speaking, connecting live from Barcelona. This is the largest consumer goods and retail podcast if you hadn't heard about us before. And it's not me that says it. We've just hit today, as we're recording, 26,000 LinkedIn followers. So it's not my opinion. It's totally neutral. I've just chosen how to rank it, I guess. So today we're going to speak about one of my favorite topics. Well, not really a topic. It's really more a thing, an object, a hobby. But whoever knows me well won't be surprised. It's beer. And this podcast actually is unique, but the audience won't see it because, it's mainly a audio-only podcast that I have on the same screen for the first time ever, because this had never happened before. We have Felix James and James Grundy, who are the co-founders of Small Beer, a low-alcohol, up-and-coming beer brand from the UK. Hi, guys. How are you?
Very well. Daniel, thank you so much for having us.
Great to be here.
It's my pleasure. Felix James and James Grundy, was that meant to be?
Absolutely. Yeah. From birth.
There was no other partnership.
Yeah. What part of the UK are you actually based in?
We're in London. We're in South London. A beautiful place called South Bermondsey. Come and see us when you're next in London.
I will. I mean, probably not when I'm next there, but I'm there for like literally a day. But in one of my other multiple visits, I think I've been to London like 8 times this year. So
Oh my goodness.
Well, as soon as you can find time for a beer, there's a beer here for you.
well, after 6 o'clock, there's plenty of time normally, especially when I'm traveling, where I have an excuse to like skip my routines. So can you tell me, like in one line, what is Small Beer?
Yeah, we are a mid-strength beer brewery, so we don't brew beers at 0 nor at 5%, but right in the middle. We brew beers for people who look for sociability, just no longer the sore head. And I think there's such a shift in how people are enjoying having alcohol, indeed a good drink in hand, but looking to avoid the impact that it has previously been having on them either late that day or indeed the following. And that's where we come in.
Very cool. And how did you guys? How long have you been running the brewery?
So we've been running for 8 years. We really specialize in making our beer in the same way as you would make a bigger beer. So it's got the same full strength, flavor as other beers have. But that same fullness and flavor, just as James says, without the sore head. But yeah, we've been running for 8 years, and we're really seeing a real surge at the moment in people really understanding and getting how small beer could fit into their lives.
Took 8 years, but people are finally getting it, no?
Absolutely. We were potentially a little bit early to the game, but it's in the last few years, the seats did really be
It's a relatively unusual concept. What were you doing before you started the brewery? Like, what are your backgrounds?
We were both in the drinks industry, in spirits, in gin, would you believe? And for me, before that, I was in the wine industry.
I've been brewing beer now for 20 years, and I was working both at a sort of homebrew level and then also professionally. So I was working at some of London's greatest breweries. In fact, started out at the biggest brewer in the world, at Budweiser, now part of AB InBev, and then worked at Fuller's Brewery for a while, kind of working my way up the management chain before I met James. Actually, we both worked at Sipsmith Gin Distillery. James had been there almost since day one, really building that brand and getting it out into the London market. And I was there for a few years and met him there.
And you mentioned that you've been brewing beer, but you were in the business. So were you like working in the brewery, or were you in commercial functions, or?
No, I was very much on the production side of things. So for the majority of my early career, I really didn't touch the commercial side of the business. And it was really only as I started to work in smaller businesses where I got closer and closer to the commercial front of the business. You're now obviously running our own business. We're very much in all sides of the business, but commercials are crucial, obviously, to keeping the business running.
I think what's nice is we've both always been in the drinks industry and we love it. You know, FMCG, the energy of building both brand, but also for us, net new category. You mentioned it earlier, Daniel, beers that are not zero, as in not cold turkey, nor at 5%, is new for people. So actually, there's a huge amount of really exciting category education that takes place. But it's a brilliant industry to do it in.
Yeah, I guess that in drink specifically, the way that you make a brand popular has like some specificities, no? Because like, for example, you have the way of like this, like a lot of big alcohol brands make it big through like being present in like cocktail bars or pubs, or some of them are maybe more like influencers now these days or through marketing. But there's like all these different ways of like getting the product out that makes it quite specific, no? I think, and the way that the trade works as well. Like you have off trade, on trade, etc. Were you James on the commercial side? In your voice?
In previously and now, yeah, absolutely. So from a sales, marketing, brand building, strategic side, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I think historically we've seen brands build in the on trade and transition latterly through to the off trade. I think the lower note to some degree in our mid-strength categories, in fact, doing that the other way round, as in that we're building in the off, where people have greater dwell time, greater consideration time around what they're purchasing, that then aligns with their lifestyles, and they're also less influenced by pack mentality that you might experience if you were out drinking with a group in the on-trade, in the on-premise, in the pubs, restaurants, and bars. Albeit that's also shifting and has been over the last 2 to 3 years, probably with the growth of zero, whereas historically it may have been, what are you drinking a non-alcoholic for? Now it's like okay, that's cool. You're choosing something that aligns with your lifestyle. And I think the mid-strength category is so exciting because it still allows all of the participation and the fun element that you don't necessarily get when you're drinking at zero, but it doesn't compromise you the following day.
Yeah. We've all had those afternoons that have gone out of control, haven't we?
There you go.
And I think there's an element to add to that. I think when, James is really talking about the UK market, but this is also a global trend, right? I mean, in Barcelona, I'm sure you must see, you've had non-alcoholic beer there as a much more accepted part of drinking. And yet still, I think you can even see, there's a big surge globally in understanding where that really fits into your lifestyle. And I think now that non-alcoholic beer has really, has become part of the accepted norm, now it's really paved the way for this next wave of moderation, of finding your way through the day and being able to drink and still get on with your day.
Yeah, and I think it comes also in the last 20 years where we've seen really beer go from a bit of a commoditized product, if you like, where there's like the big commercial brands. I don't know, when my mom grew up in New Zealand, there were like 2 brands, I think, of beer, right? And now New Zealand is one of, like, we've seen the flourishment of the craft beer culture, for example. Like, as a category, it's like wine has always had like more that culture of like connoisseurs, a lot of like little producers and so on. Same with whiskeys, for example. But beer never had that. It was much more industrialized, no? I think, do you see like yourselves as part of like that wider movement, or
The wider craft movement.
I think the craft, or I guess you could call it like that. Yeah.
I suppose what's so exciting about pushing the boundaries of what's possible is that, yes, it's given the consumer more choice, but it's also for us here about changing, for example, how we go about making it, not from a brewing perspective, but from a responsible production perspective. We do a lot in terms of reducing the water that's used during the production process. It's one of the reasons that we were recognized as London's first, and in fact remain London's only B Corp brewery. And actually, unless there are people constantly looking at new innovations, pushing the industry forward, pushing the category forward, it can become a bit dormant and stale. And that's what's really exciting, is in that it's paving the way, and we hope inspiring others and also the bigger producers to make changes or have positive impact also.
But you have to tell me, guys, how, when you were working together, and I imagine you had like a fixed paycheck job, what came through your mind to actually leave that behind and start a brewery together? Also, it takes like a lot of trust in the other person and a lot of patience with the other person to start a business together, no? It's like a marriage, or even worse.
Or even worse.
It's an interesting.
How your marriage was going, I suppose.
I'm not married. I'd say it's one of those things that I'd say we're probably naturally quite entrepreneurial people, and we had individually, I think we'd probably both seen ourselves in developing, and wanting to push the agenda forward in some way. And it was only a case of, I think once we'd landed on this idea, it was clear that this was the one, because it not only did it fit our own strengths and it fit our own interests, but it also felt like the right thing to do in terms of, we are actually benefiting the world, the people around us, both in terms of, doing better by the planet, but also doing better by our culture. We think that it's a positive movement forwards in the drinking culture. We live in particularly in the UK, we have a really strong volume drinking culture. People drink beer in pints, and they like to drink quickly. And we recognize that, I think, for the last 20, 30 years, people have slowly sort of been forced, I'd say, by the industry to drink the same volume of beer, but really, it was just getting stronger and stronger. So I guess that really, that brought us together, that sort of shared sense that we could do better.
So you always had the idea of starting the brewery being like a mid-strength, in this mid-strength segment. That was always the idea.
Always, absolutely.
And how did that come about?
Well, it came about interestingly, through history of gin talks. And during the Sipsmith days, when I was talking about Hogarth's Gin Lane and Beer Street and these references both to gin, but also this category, this historic category of small beer that was consumed at the time for both nutrition, but also for hydration. And the fact that actually spending as much time in the on-premise, particularly as I was at that time, looking for something that delivered on that flavor aspect and the joy of drinking a great pint but that wouldn't, as we've discussed, leave one reeling.
Would disrupt your next day or your sleep or whatever?
Right. So it was, and in the Middle Ages, small beer was as common as bread, and it was really lost at the end of the 1800s. Water filtration methodologies increased tenfold. The art producing it well was, the art producing it was lost. It was hard to do well. But I didn't have the production expertise, and Felix has an incredible amount of production expertise. And but that's what the idea stemmed from history and from telling these historic stories, but actually thinking this is something really aligned with modern day lifestyles and all of that which we juggle.
So small beers already existed. It's like a product that was like discontinued.
Yeah, exactly. The name itself is certainly, it's no coincidence. So we effectively stole the name of the category of beer that existed for the best part of 1,000 years. People were drinking small beer from the Middle Ages right up until the early 20th century.
We're like they were reinvigorating it. We're bringing it back.
I think it's great to have that heritage and that background. I mean, I think it's a beautiful story, really. I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we like to say is that it's rooted in history, but we make it for today.
No, that's all. I mean, and that's, a lot of historical brands, it's kind of their strength. It's a difficult balance, but it's like having that heritage and that brand recognition with finding points of relevance with today's culture, right? And I think that you've been able to like fast forward that heritage. So I think it's a very smart strategy, really. What does it like? Because in the room that you're sitting, there's like all these like tanks of beer where you typically see in craft breweries. What does it take to start a brewery? Like, what were like the first steps for you guys 8 years ago?
Wow, it was so initially we still had day jobs. We were meeting up at half past 6 in the morning when the local coffee shop opened, and we would go in there and spend the first couple of hours of our day strategizing, building the business plan effectively, and then we, as time progressed, we started going out looking for spaces to start up, and we found this absolutely beautiful, well, at the time perhaps not so beautiful, but this warehouse that we thought was really suitable, and we got cracking. I mean, they were long days. It was a very, very early starts and then long evenings. Running experiments, having these discussions, bringing investors on board.
Yeah. And then brewing together at the weekends.
Exactly. And it was, and then when we moved into this space, we were working around the clock. I mean, one day followed into the next day, into the next. We've barely had time to sleep. But we were plugging away. We had a lot of building to do. Breweries are very capital intensive, and they take a lot of startup time, getting the place built. But we were intent on making sure that we didn't have any downtime. We wanted to get this place built and get brewing as quickly as possible and get to market. So we really put a lot of emphasis on planning, on getting breweries set up, and we got the whole thing built and ready to go within a matter of months. And meanwhile, I was continuing to brew, so I effectively brought my home brewing kit that had by that point become kind of semi-commercial sized, put it in the brewery, and we still use it today as our pilot plant. So we still use it for development, product development. And I put that in here, and we actually brewed. I mean, our first orders of small beer were coming from this little home brewing kit. Which, so James was out flying the flag and bringing orders in. And meanwhile, we were both building the brewing kit that we use today and brewing, 3 or 4 times a day. They were long shifts, 20, 21, 22 hours at a time.
How difficult was it? And how do you actually get? Because I think your whole value proposition is like same flavor as a regular beer, but lower alcohol, because that's the thing that I think alienates a lot of people from the non-alcohol category is that the flavor is not exactly the same. You can be told that it's really good, but it's not exactly the same. So how do you get that?
Well, you pointed out when you're making non-alcoholic beer, you have to compromise, right? So you either don't create the alcohol in the first place, in which case you end up with this kind of slightly sweet and sometimes quite spiky flavors because you're not fermenting. You don't have that full flavor of a beer, really. Technically, it's not really a beer. Or you create the alcohol and then you strip it out. And if you strip alcohol out of beer, you also bring with that alcohol lots of wonderful aromatic aromas and flavor. Beer, when you make it, it's a very delicate product. So you have to really look after it. And, boiling alcohol out of beer is not a delicate process. Even in the most high-tech breweries, it always comes with a compromise. Whereas the way that we make our beer is effectively the same way as you make a stronger beer, a 4 or 5% beer. And in fact, the recipe is is effectively a recipe for a 4 or 5% beer. Our process differs in the way that, so I designed all of the brewing kit specifically to make small beer. And I designed the process specifically to make small beer. And every single opportunity along that pathway, we opt for flavor, maximizing that flavor over the creation of alcohol.
Mm-hmm. And have you tried like blind testing people, like comparing beer, like your beer versus a regular beer?
Absolutely, and it's amazing to see people's faces when they realize, when you tell them, hey, look, this is mid-strength beer, and they go, what does that even mean? I'm like, I don't get it.
Does that have also an extrapolation of like that it's actually better for you than a regular beer?
Absolutely. Look, beer, apart from the alcohol, has lots of wonderful nutrients in it. So, the reason that people were drinking beer throughout the day in historic times was not just about, they were drinking it for hydration and they were drinking it for nutrition. And the great thing about small beer is it sits below the diuretic limit of alcohol, which means that as you're drinking, you're actually hydrating as you drink. So
what is that limit?
So the limit is 2.8%.
And you're between 2.4 and 2.7, right?
Our beer is 2.1 is the lowest beer that we produce, our lager, 2.1 to 2.7. Okay. So all of our beers are below that diuretic limit. So you're hydrating as you drink. And effectively, beer is also naturally isotonic. So it's a very effective way of hydrating. It's really, it's the same thickness as your blood plasma. So as you're drinking it actually hydrates you, very effectively. It also contains lots of micronutrients, things like zinc and selenium, manganese that you don't get from other food sources, or, much harder to get from other food sources. And then, and some that you'll be more aware of, iron, folic acid. These things you don't get from other foods. So they're really, there are good parts to beer. Clearly, there is also one major bad component of drinking beer, and that is the alcohol itself. Alcohol, we know is not particularly good in large doses, and it's also calorific. So if you drink higher alcohol drinks, you're taking on a lot more calories, and you're also, you're potentially harming your vital organs.
Yeah. So the fact that like less than half of the alcohol means it's better for you. It's not as bad for you, at least.
Literally, because the majority of the calories come from alcohol, when you drink a half-strength beer, you're getting the full flavor, you're getting all those other benefits from a health perspective, but you're also getting half the amount of alcohol. Therefore, it's not damaging your body in the same way as a stronger beer would do, and you're also getting a beer with half the calories.
Yeah.
We don't want to stop people from drinking beer, right? That's critical.
Well, but it's selling beer as well.
Beer is a vital part of our culture. It's a vital part of, enjoying yourself, socializing with friends, and yet giving people an option to drink a mid-strength beer just gives you all these added benefits. In addition to that sociability, you get that wonderful social feeling. And the great thing is then you don't become antisocial after drinking 3 or 4 beers. I mean, that's, that really is the crux of, that's why the experience of drinking small beer is really so joyful and so easy to enjoy, is that you have a few beers and you don't really have to worry about, well, if I have a couple more of these, am I then going to struggle?
Yeah. Or you don't feel best the next day
Or tomorrow.
Yeah. Because the UK drinking culture has its great things, but it also has its issues. No, like there is like some violence connected to drinking culture globally, but in the UK specifically. So I think. Well, I mean, how do you guys see it?
We've got a number of alcohol-related challenges in the UK. I mean, you take sports grounds now. I mean, football. What a sad state of affairs it is that we're in, where you can't now drink a beer whilst enjoying some great live sport.
You can't here either. In Spain, you can't either.
Yeah, interesting. And it seems like such a shame that it has got to that place. And I think a large number of people put that on higher alcohol or large consumptions of alcohol fuel behavior.
Yeah. And now that you've been running the business for 8 years, like if you look back, I don't know, like what are there any like big moments or funny moments that you remember? I mean, maybe you can tell me one each.
Yeah. I would say the last 8 years have been an entire string of big moments. I mean, it's one of those things where sometimes you feel like you're pedaling so hard and perhaps you're not getting as far as you would like to. And then, one of the techniques that we use to really, to get our minds in the right mindset is you just think back to what the business was like 3 months ago. And every time that we do that, we realized that the business was in a completely different place 3 months ago. I mean, you just have to, look back to a couple of photos or something and you go, whoa, hold on a second. The business has progressed so much. But yeah, no, we've definitely had some exciting moments. Go on,
tell me one specific one.
Yeah.
Here, look, I think it's always exciting when you get a new retail listing. Yeah. It's so joyful when you're standing at a bar and you see somebody ordering your beer. You've had no influence over them, and maybe they're telling a friend about it too. But I think also we're very fortunate. We've got an amazing team here, and those occasions where the team come together, they're so passionate. They're so. What's been the best moment, your best memory so far?
The first time of having a small beer poured in a pub in the on-trade. First time you walk in, you see a tap badge on there, and you say, "Can I have one of those?"
And they on tap.
Wow! And they pour that beer for you. They put it down in front of you. Tastes amazing. And you're like, "Goodness me, we made this," and now you're pouring it over your bar, and that's really exciting. And actually, having been in the drinks industry for many years previously, when we'd seen brands that we were very, very heavily invested and very deeply involved in being served to us, that's always exciting. That way it's only gone from field to brewery built to shipping it out in keg to that very first pint of draft beer being poured for you and handed over to you by the person working on the bar. That's a pretty special moment.
Yeah. And what's been the worst moment or the most challenging moment? Because now you've been like all the quirks of like running a business, of selling, of producing, all the costs, and you had COVID in the middle as well. What's been like the worst day that you've had?
COVID was pretty tough. Like I think every business went through a wobble at the beginning of COVID when there was so much uncertainty and we had absolutely no idea what was going to happen to our business and whether we would see our business survive in the same way as it was pre-COVID. But I guess, a lot of businesses would have struggled with that. But there was certainly a moment, where we didn't know what the future of our business was going to look like. But we managed to get through that. I would say there was another terrifying moment a little, early on for us when we had just launched into Majestic Wines, large retailer nationwide, and we got the news that, we were seeing our beer that wasn't quite as good as it could be, and we ended up driving around the entire country, and we went to all 200 Majestic stores to swap out the beer that, this is one of our first batches really on a large scale. And it just was kind of 95% the way there, but we just knew that it wasn't the beer that we wanted to put into people's hands. And we went out around every single Majestic store. And you know what? That was a terrifying moment to think that we were going to have to take a couple of weeks out to get that done. But it was one of the best decisions we've ever made. I mean, we got around and we saw firsthand so many people that were central really to us selling the brand. Because at the end of the day, people will buy beer from James and myself, so much easier than they will from anybody else, because we love and feel the brand, on a day-to-day basis. But when you can get that passion across to other people, when we speak firsthand to people who are selling our beer, at the coalface, it is so vitally important because they can multiply that effort, and they can help us toward our goal to really getting beer out to more people and allowing more people to enjoy the benefit of drinking mid-strength beer.
And speaking of that, like, how have you, with limited resources, how have you well, first of all, what had the sales process been for you guys, like business development?
Well, interestingly, in terms of the market, we obviously have a wholesale model in the UK, so you can either ship from the brewery directly to on-premise customers or indeed retailers, or via third-party wholesalers. And actually, we started doing a little bit of both from almost from day one. Going through third parties is brilliant in many respects because it supports you in growing out your own sales team, albeit through your wholesale partners, whilst remaining mindful of the fact that they've probably got quite a large portfolio of brands that they're representing. So I think it's always worth keeping that expectation measured. So we did a bit of both from the get-go, with pricing models accordingly. And we have our own electric van that goes out. We didn't do a lot of deliveries through London and the Southeast ourselves, but then we continue to work very closely with those partners. And the same with retail. So for some of our retail partners, we go direct to their warehouses. Others, we go through a third-party wholesaler. And that's always an interesting line to tread, because you're looking at where the product ends up on shelf in terms of price point and making sure that the value chain works as you come back to the the sourcing what for us we believe to be the best barley in the UK. But there's lots of stops along the way.
Yeah. And the UK trade is, like most big country trade, is known to be tough to get in there as well. How do you call up the buyers directly, or do you send them samples? What have you tried?
You do all of that and more, whether you're camping outside office or whether you're calling up and sending samples. Look, I think the traditional trade shows remains relevant. I think people also like to see trade buyers. I think are more visible now at consumer shows, because actually they like to see how brands are showing up in front of their consumers as well now, as much as they do at a trade show, because that's how they activate. And it also then gives them a sense as to what the consumer's response, their customers' responses are to the brands themselves. So look, we've definitely done it all, but our first national retailer was Majestic Wine, as Felix mentioned earlier, and their embracing of the innovation and their ability to tell story through a very, very well-educated team of individuals on the shop floor was a game changer for us, because they could talk about the category that we were building and how it aligned with people's lifestyles. So, really important to find that great first partner and to double down on your investment there into them.
Totally. And what about, so this is sales, what about marketing? So if I have a look at your beer, you went for quite I would call it minimalistic design. What was the thinking behind that?
I think there's so much busyness and noise in the beer space, particularly in the craft beer space, of aliens and the skulls and very loud, very bright. But actually, that almost was making the shelf, the viewing the shelf, one was quite numb to all of that, because that's what everything was. And actually, standout was simplicity. So the hand is actually that of Felix, very much a nod to his skill in craftsmanship and producing the beer. It's also, we wanted to find something across a language barrier, a border, a busy bar, something that people can have fun with and engage with. What are you drinking? Yeah, I'm drinking a small beer. And I think that simplicity we actually found cut through the noise far greater than being another very bold, brash brand on the shelf.
And did you establish like what would be like your target audience? Because I don't know, I can think of many use cases. Like I was speaking Felix the other day that here in Spain, for example, when you look at like outside bars who's drinking alcohol-free beer, it's a lot of older people, for example, that drink it. Or that you could also say people like me that like to drink beer, or like us probably that like to drink beer, and we want to enjoy the flavor and maybe not have that much alcohol. But you could also think of Gen Z, for example, who famously, they say, I don't know how true it is, that they drink less than us millennials. So I don't know if you had like a specific persona in mind, if you thought this is going to be like our initial focus.
We certainly thought, early on we expected for small beer really to work with a whole range of different people. But we were also, I guess, thinking of our own lives. We were, we had very busy lifestyles. As young professionals, we had, I had young kids at the time. James was very, very soon after, would follow on with young kids. When you have to get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to look after the kids, and then you've got to get to work and you've got to do it all. It's very hard to maintain that and still juggle that and be able to have a beer every now and then. So we were thinking, I guess, that, that as young professionals and young parents, it would be sort of relevant for those people. But when we first launched, when COVID hit and we really saw the orders start to pick up on the website, and we now run, e-commerce is a significant part of our trade. We saw that, there were significant numbers of people in their 60s and above who were ordering small beer, and having it delivered regularly to their homes. I mean, we run a subscription service. It's a really, really useful part of what we do, but it also helps to integrate small beer into people's lives when they always want to have that ability to have a mid-strength beer at home and to give to their friends and family. So that was an interesting insight for us, actually, to see who was buying our beer, because when you're selling directly into the trade, you don't necessarily always see who your consumer is. I mean, you can go and visit the pubs that you're in, you can go and, see who's picking it off the shelves, but you're not going to be there at all points at all times. Whereas when you're selling online, you're much closer to your customer and you can see exactly you can see fairly well who these people are.
No, and by the way, it's interesting that you've made direct to consumer work, because you know that in FMCG, it was kind of one of these big promises that would work, and it's never really taken off for FMCG brands. It has taken off for consumer electronics or fashion, obviously, but it's interesting that you guys, being a niche brand, have been able to make it work. And on top of it, you get all this data about your consumers, which is super valuable.
I think it's hard to make those assumptions across the whole of FMCG, right? Certain channels are going to work better for certain businesses. As James said, we were surprised to see our brand really developing in the off trade, before we had really established a really strong connection with the with the more mass market on trade. Now, but I guess for us, e-commerce works really effectively. We speak to other brewers and other drinks manufacturers, and they don't see that in the same way. So I guess it's so particular, not just to what we make, but really to our brand and what it is that we stand for.
Yeah. How do you get the brand out of there? How do you do marketing? Particularly marketing when you don't have deep pockets. Okay, so great question. So we started doing a lot of consumer shows, and actually that was amazing for us. I think there is still something so joyful about being able to discover a new brand, meet the founder, meet the team, and people still buy into that. I do. I know I certainly do personally when I'm looking for a new food or drinks or other brand for that matter. So we started with consumer shows, but we definitely did a bit of the paid media. We still do a little bit of PPC work. There's no doubt about that. We did some out of home work. There's no doubt about that either. And the traditional publications, particularly those with our retail partners, the Waitrose Kitchens of the world and the Majestic Wine magazines. And look, it all helped in building brand, also spreading word. But there's very little that is as strong as word of mouth when you're talking about buying from prospective customers. And actually, if you can engage with one person and they have a really, really positive experience and they tell 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 others, we always found that was the strongest way to go about doing so. And interestingly, less so through referral schemes and such, also through those really, really impactful engagements. And that could simply be through us standing in a store over the summer period or the Christmas period, personally introducing our brands to those individuals. And as you say, almost identifying our target market, whether that was those professional parents who are spinning many plates but still wanting to enjoy a good beer at the end of the day, or simply, as Felix was saying, those 60 plus audience who enjoy a beer or two at the end of every day, but were simply looking to half their unit intake. Yeah. I recently interviewed on the podcast the marketing director of Little Moons, which is interesting because it's a bit similar to you guys in terms of it's a product that existed, ice creams, but presented in a different way. And they had like a huge boom, forget the year, on TikTok. They did. And then they were actually able to sustain that afterwards. Is that something that you're actively looking for, like moments of like social media virality, or?
Yeah, the social media virality and the content output, being how effective one can be on certain channels. I mean, obviously TikTok's a little bit more challenging for alcohol brands because of being able to both promote and really show the consumption of alcohol on TikTok isn't the one, versus consuming a product like Little Moose and promoting a product like Little Moose on TikTok. But we definitely double down on Meta. There's no doubt about that. And Pinterest is particularly interesting for our US market and US marketing, albeit you have challenges around connecting your online stores via Pinterest. They don't allow for that, but they do allow for far more visibility on alcohol. But a big US and a large female audience on that as a platform. So we're always looking at these platforms. LinkedIn is obviously a fascinating one and interesting to see where the brands can really be built and understanding where there are success stories on actually building brand on LinkedIn. We look at very closely. I think BPC both continues to get positive reviews and negative reviews when you're looking at the pay-per-click space. And for some, it can be a sinkhole of money. And for others, with the right creative and right content, it can still be very beneficial. So, we continue to look at that closely and think about actually where the market is going and what we can be producing from a content perspective that's really going to resonate.
And by the way, I never asked you, like, what in your portfolio, how many types of beers do you have now?
We have 2 hero SKUs in our lager and our hazy. Then we have a beautiful kind of supporting chorus. There is the occasional seasonal that comes in and out of that. We tend to only we're not a seasonal beer every month sort of brewery or every week. We tend to do 2, maximum 3 seasonal, because you have
Summer one, a winter one.
Exactly. Yeah, it's summer and winter one traditionally for us. But there's then a kind of a portfolio of 5, as in 3 supporting SKUs and then 2 hero products.
Which the hero products are lager, which would taste like a quote unquote regular beer, and then a hazy. Would that be more like an IPA?
Spot on. Yeah, beautiful kind of new world hazy IPA that just bursts with mango, guava, and passion fruit. Really juicy, really tropical, but very, very balanced. Amazing for those who enjoy that more craft style. And then a very classical Pilsner, which is just one of the cleanest, crispest things you'll drink. It's beautiful.
Nice. Awesome. Where can I find your beer right now? Like, do you know how many pubs like you're in right now?
Yeah, we're in about, and we're very strong in London and kind of the south, as you'd imagine. But we're in about 150 pubs in terms of draft, retail, about 1,500 when you're talking about Marks and Spencer and Waitrose and Majestic Wine, and indeed obviously the reach that an online retailer like Ocado provides. But then there's a raft of smaller independent delis and farm shocks and retailers on your street corner that you'll be able to find us in as well. So particularly strong in retail, but with a very, very core base of on-trade draft customers, who have embraced the innovation and are really, I think, probably reaping the benefits.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to get into Right Bros and M&S, pretty big.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very close. I must say, phenomenally supportive. I think people often say, God, working with the big retailers, they really heard us on this, that, and the other. But speaking on our experience with both of them, I must say, incredibly supportive of independent British producers. So we can only hope that others are having similar experiences.
You have a wide range of listeners listening from across the globe, as I understand. So certainly, if you're in the UK, all of the above, plus, of course, on our website. And as I mentioned, we run a really great subscription program on there as well. But then also, you can find us across the states. So in almost all states now, direct to consumer. So on the website, again, if you go to our website, to Small Beer, and then also across the kind of eastern states as well, in retail.
Yeah, on the likes of Whole Foods and Acme, through New Jersey and Pennsylvania, right the way up to Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
Oh, no. So obviously I'll leave your website and your personal LinkedIn's on the show notes. So if anyone wants to buy the beer, but we also have retailers on the audience. If anyone wants to maybe buy your beer as a retailer, they can get in touch with you guys directly. Maybe somebody wants to acquire you. You never know. But what are your goals for the coming year? Or where would you like to, if we speak in 1 year, where would you like the business to be at? Because you said that every 3 months something happens. So
absolutely. I mean, it really it would be hard to tell you exactly what's going to happen in the next year, but we have an overarching goal, which is really to provide every opportunity that someone has to drink beer. They should always have the opportunity to drink a mid-strength beer as well, whether that's in person, on premise, in retail, or online. So that's a really big goal, and I guess it's a case of, incrementally getting there step by step. It's always tough to say when the next multiple retailer is going to list us, because these conversations, sometimes take many years. I mean, some of our retailers have taken years to come on board. We're really working very heavily on the kind of casual dining restaurant front, and we've got some nice groups now lined up. So there will be, you'll be seeing small beer. You'll be seeing a lot more of us. Put it that way.
Without wanting to give too much away.
That's fine. That's fine. And guys, we have a question that we ask all our guests here, which is, especially you guys as being working for others and now being entrepreneurs, if you went back to the beginning of your career, what's that like one piece of advice you'd give yourself? I know it would be like 10, but you can only choose one.
I always like to say, because I'm probably not as good as it as I would like to be myself, it's nice to take in the view while you're on the journey, and don't just push for that next checkpoint, albeit that's important because you've got to keep the lights on, but nice to take a moment to really acknowledge it might be successes, might be challenges that you've overcome, and it could be small wins, but always important to raise a small beer when you have a small win, I always think.
I would say, looking after the team and those around you, looking after loved ones just feeds back. Like, it's very easy to think, well, I've just got to work as hard as I possibly can as an individual. If I don't continually feed James, he's not going to feed me. And, we all have to look after each other in this. And actually, you do need that support network to push on. So I think, being kind to yourself and others around you isn't as important as pushing yourself forward.
Yeah. And I think we saw, like, when, like 10, 15 years ago, there was more culture of like, the boss has to be an asshole type of thing. And I think that's changing a lot. Hopefully it is. Because, I think we're all very tired of psychopaths being in charge of things. So,
Yeah, I think, when you enjoy the people you work with and coming into work every day, right, it doesn't feel right like work, right? It's just it's a pleasure, and and if we can create an environment for the team that it just feels like I love what I do, then that, I think that's a real success for both of us, and then trying to be mindful of our own times around carving out that all important family time is pretty critical.
Definitely. Well, guys, really loved learning about your business. I didn't know that small beer was actually a thing, like a couple of centuries before. So, I'm very keen to come to taste your beer when I come to London. Not the next time, but the second after next. So maybe first week of December, we can post a picture on LinkedIn. I really like how you've developed your business through trade, through online as well, through retailers. I think that you've also seen, I think that when you start a business, there's always the assumptions that you make. And it's very important, I think, to be listening to always like what's happening out there and adapt, but still following that North Star. So super excited to see what the future of your business, but also this mid-strength beer category, because I think it has a lot of potential really as an avid beer drinker as well.
Thanks, Daniel. Well, Lucas, we really appreciate you having us, and we'll look forward to seeing you for a Christmas beer here at the brewery in South Bermondsey.
Excellent. Well, wait for me. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG, guys. Have a great one.
Content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from Dwyer Partners SL, doing business as the FMCG guys, or the individual author, host, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Dwyer Partners SL. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Dwyer Partners SL expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we presented in this podcast.